He wrote the story because he wanted to murder children throwing rocks at the Israeli soldiers and said, wow, it's fucked up that I thought that, huh? People are fucked up. Yeah. Are you taking her out? Oh. The not so hidden Israeli politics of The Last of Us Part 2. We need a new Jack and Daxter stat. Hell, a new Sly Cooper even. Okay, furry. How about you fucking dial it back a little bit, okay? This is how you know. This is how you know a motherfucker's a furry, okay? Immediately. He's like suspiciously the only games that he wants to remaster. The only games that he wants to remaster are furry games. Your furry dar is on point. Oh, yeah. Nailed him. Last of Us Part 2 presents what at first seems like an even-handed point of view, but perpetuates the very cycles of violence it's supposed to be so troubled by. Yeah, I mean, the game's co-director and co-writer Neil Druckmann, an Israeli who was born and raised in the West Bank before his family moved to the U.S., told, oh my God, he was a settler too. I did not know that he was in the West Bank. That the game's themes of revenge can be traced back to the 2000 killing of 2 Israeli soldiers by a mob in Ramallah. Some of the gruesome details of the incident were captured on video, which Druckmann viewed. In his interview, he recounted the anger and desire for vengeance he felt when he saw the video and how he later reconsidered and regretted those impulses, saying they made him feel gross and guilty, but it gave him a kernel of a story. It's kind of wild.
So The Last of Us Part 2 has basically...
Dude, if it's a fucking Middle Eastern conflict in any capacity that talks about video games, you know his ass is making a video, okay? The Kavernacle. A person who, like, I didn't know anything about, and then I absolutely loved his, like, MGS videos. He did a call-out video where he, like, added me into the call-out a little bit, and that was my first interaction with him. And I have so much respect for this dude. Very smart guy. Very knowledgeable. Like, you could tell he's a typical fucking Middle Eastern. What's the, when you go to college, what's the genre? Is it like Middle Eastern conflict? Is that your major? Like, what is it? Middle Eastern studies? Is that what it's called? I don't fucking know. Yeah. Typical Middle Eastern studies, Andy, over here. A classic. No, not conflict resolution. No, not even poli-sci. It's like underneath. It's a different genre. Like, some people do international relations. Some people do Middle Eastern studies. He's definitely a like a Middle Eastern studies guy genre. No, he's very smart and very knowledgeable, and I like his video game takes as well. So this is actually interesting to see. Let's hear what Neil Druckmann said about it.
Oh, okay. So we stay high level as much as I can.
What the fuck is this audio, dude? Are you joking? He has a master's degree in international relations. Yes, exactly. Typical fucking YouTube essayist guy, okay? Unnecessarily overqualified, spends the rest of his life basically doing dissertations, but in a YouTube video format. Also, this is the worst thing I've ever heard.
I grew up in Israel.
I can't even tell. I can't tell what he's saying. He's just so bass boosted. I swear to fuck, if you get stun locked off this, I'm telling the idea of Hamas is a tunnel under your house. Bro. Look at the PlayStation logo. It says Israel. Yeah.
The West Bank in a town called Betoye. And I lived there until 89, but my older brother, was really into video games. So from as early as I can remember, we just played computer games nonstop. Really? And I actually learned English playing a lot of old
okay, bro,
games.
dial it back a little bit. Like, if he grew up in West Bank, is that not Palestine, not Israel? Yes, bro. I mean, of course he's going to say that. I think it's really interesting. I mean, I didn't know what his perspective was. I just only briefly heard that it was like Israel related. All right, let's hear what, maybe he'll summarize it so I don't have to fucking hear this audio.
Conflict with Palestine does influence this game because, like the critic in the Vice article says later, is that it's a centrist view that both sides stopped, then you could solve this issue.
To be fair though, if his family in the 80s was in fucking West Bank, like that's the most ride or die motherfucking settlers out there. Like 80s? Like he grew up in the West Bank in the 80s, dog? That's crazy. There was like 10,000 settlers at that point. What the fuck were you doing? That's like the first wave. Ceasefire is possibly going to begin at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Look at this pervert. Look at this news pervert. See? We got many different... Everyone can't help themselves, you know? Hamas source saying... Thank you, Elent News. I'm just kidding. Hamas source saying a possible ceasefire will begin tomorrow morning at 11. Yeah, I've heard this as well. 5 days ceasefire, right? You are a news pervert. You are looking at video game Palestine. Okay, chill.
But it's because both sides keep going, and like I said, that is quite a centrist view of the conflict because one side is doing something to the other side that the other side cannot even do to the Israelis. Now I want to move on to the Last of Us podcast. Now this podcast is absolutely amazing. Like, it's one of the best produced podcasts I've ever listened to. It's basically 8 episodes, 4 on The Last of Us 1, 4 on The Last of Us 2, interviews people who designed the combat, obviously interviews Druckmann, Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, Laura Bailey, lots of audio from the games, scenes from the games. It's really great. If you didn't know this exists, please seek this out. It's so good. I've listened to it about 3 times now. I love these games so much. But here is him talking about the influence of Israeli politics and his own experience on the first Last of Us game.
Funny you say the hard decision, and I think about Joel, and for him it's not a hard decision.
It's so funny to have the Last of Us podcast look exactly like the Intercepted podcast.
It's a no decision. Like, I'm not going to stop to do anything that'll put my daughter at risk. And if I go on a tangent real quick, I'm originally from Israel, so I follow a lot of Israeli politics. And there was this guy, Gilad Shalit, a soldier who was kidnapped and held prisoner for years by Hamas. And then there was an exchange of hundreds of prisoners for this one soldier. And some of the prisoners that were exchanged had blood on their hands, like committed horrible terrorist acts. And there was a big debate in Israel, was it right to like exchange so many people that were in prison for this one soldier to bring him back? And I remember I talked with my dad about it, and I'm like, what do you think? Do you think that was the right decision? And he says, are you asking me as like the soldier's dad or as the prime minister of Israel? Because that would make 2 very different decisions. As the prime minister of Israel, I think they made the wrong decision. I think they're now less safe because they made this thing. As the guy's dad, I would have traded every prisoner in every prison for this guy. And that's really what the story is about. Do the ends justify the means? And it's really so much about perspective. If it was maybe to save a strange kid versus a family, maybe Joel would have made a very different decision. But when it was like his tribe, his daughter, there was no question about what he's going to do.
So there he's kind of talking about how the ending of The Last of Us 1 is influenced by this one event between Israel and Palestine. And from a matter of perspective, you can rationalize what someone like Joel
Why'd you say, bro, fix your internet? What? My internet's fine.
does. So in this context, it's handing over a bunch of Hamas prisoners, I guess, to Gaza and to the Hamas leadership, and in exchange they give you one Israeli soldier. And like he was saying, if that was your son, then you would do anything. If you were the government of Israel, maybe you might take a different approach, even though they did, you know, trade them back. And because they're less safe because of this, like in the end of Last of Us Part 1, Joel chooses to save Ellie, but is the world less safe because there is no vaccine, I guess. So it's clear Israeli politics has always influenced this game. Druckmann also elaborates a bit further on what we heard in that interview with IGN Israel in talking about how it influences the politics of Part 2. So an interview, or like this profile piece on the Washington Post called The Evolution of Ellie, talks about this. So it says, the formulation for Ellie's turn towards darkness can be traced back to the year 2000. Then in his early 20s, Neil Druckmann witnessed news footage of a crowd lynching 2 Israeli soldiers in the West Bank, and they cheered afterward. Druckmann, who grew up in Israel, recalls, it was the cheering that was really chilling to me. In my mind, I thought, oh man, if I could push a button and kill all these people that committed this horrible act, I would make them feel the same pain they had inflicted on these people.
I mean, this is great. Like, if you're conceptualizing the never-ending cycle of violence, and your cutoff point is like the 2 Israeli soldiers that were lynched in the West Bank, and not the violence that preceded, like the violence that came before then you all of a sudden demonstrate that your never-ending cycle of violence conversation is like kind of one-sided, right? Okay, everyone is saying not fun. This is not fun. You know what? Here, fuck it. Okay, YOLO. All right, whatever. Last of Us 2. This is, I think a lot of people forget that for me, this is what I thrive at, okay? Like stupid-ass ADHD-laden rabbit holes that we go down. And all of you are complaining. Like, we went to it because Last of Us 2 is going to get a remaster. And I was making fun of how silly it is to get a remaster this early on. You know what I mean? When the game just came out and not do a remaster for Bloodborne. I talked about the Japanese economy. I talked about how stupid it is for Sony to not make a Bloodborne remaster. And then we were moving on to like The Last of Us 2 being, you know, made by a guy who I guess tried to make it analogous to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And immediately everybody goes, nah, dude, this is not fun. This is not fun for me. What do you want? You want to fucking watch all of the SNL videos? Is that what you want?